This Congress did a ton of really practical stuff. It would be nice if we had a next Congress, too. And even if you don't have high expectations for what this next Congress is going to do, given the leadership and how they're starting, they are one of our branches of government, one that we might technically need. And this isn't the time to be giving any of them up. You might have seen this on the editorial page of the New York Times today. Headline here, a failed speaker vote for Kevin McCarthy would be a historic event. And this was written by a man who knows of which he speaks. His name is Brendan Buck. He was an advisor to the last two Republicans who served as Speaker of the House. He was an advisor to John Boehner and Paul Ryan. Today he says this: opening day in the House of Representatives is typically marked by the usual pageantry and the fleeting promise that this Congress will work better than the last. That hope could be immediately dashed this year if the House fails to elect a speaker on the first ballot and descends into a floor fight unprecedented in modern times. A small band of Republican misfits has vowed to vote against Kevin McCarthy, the party's nominee for Speaker. With a razor-thin majority, just 5 Republicans voting against him could deny McCarthy the gavel. This would be no small event. The House last failed to elect a Speaker on the first ballot in 1923, and it's only happened once since the Civil War. Electing a Speaker is a responsibility given the House by the Constitution. Allowing the process to unravel into chaos would diminish the entire body. McCarthy still has time to reach an agreement with his critics, and he should do all within reason to secure the speakership on the first vote. Otherwise, a self-serving power play by a small group of Republicans threatens to make a mockery of the institution and further cement the notion that the party is not prepared to lead. A failed vote would badly weaken McCarthy or whoever the new speaker will be. This is an interesting point. The House is a majoritarian institution, and a speaker's power is ultimately derived from the ability to produce the 218 minimum votes needed to do business. If Republicans are unable to muster the votes for a speaker, it will make very clear from the outset that they cannot be counted on to fulfill the body's basic responsibilities, such as funding the government and preventing a credit default by lifting the debt ceiling, both of which will be required this year. Should McCarthy come up short on the first ballot, it could take several more votes and days until we have a new speaker. But no matter who emerges as the top House Republican, the prolonged spectacle would leave the Republican majority hopelessly damaged from the start, along with the institution of the House itself. This would be damaging to the institution of the House itself. Joining us now is Brendan Buck. He served as a senior advisor to 2 former Republican House Speakers, John Boehner and Paul Ryan. Mr. Buck, I really appreciate you making time to be here tonight. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So I feel like you're trying to raise the alarm here, that this isn't just Washington drama, that there are consequences here beyond the personalities involved. There's consequences here for Congress as an institution. I wanted to ask you here to talk about that tonight because I feel like I haven't been that worried about Congress. And I think a lot of other people have been worried about the resilience of our form of government writ large, but I haven't been worried that Congress and its ability to constitute itself and act in normal terms has been at stake. Why do you think that's at stake in this fight?
Well, I understand where you come from in that. You see headlines and it always seems to work itself out. And I think this is a situation where it may not work itself out, at least not in the first couple days. Look, the Speaker of the House is the second in line to the president. Obviously, constituting a Congress is important. They have some basic responsibilities, but electing a speaker is important. Having a speaker is important. And as I said, there are a lot of important things that they have to do. If Kevin McCarthy is not elected speaker, they're going to have to elect somebody else. And they might have to do that on the fly, completely unvetted. Somebody who isn't even running for speaker right now may end up being Speaker of the House in 2 days. Someone you may not even be on your radar could be Speaker of the House in 2 days. And that's a real reality that we're facing right now. This, again, has not happened in a very long time. Nobody on the floor going into this process will have ever seen this before. And so we'll have a bit of chaos. It could be vote after vote. And ultimately, you don't know how it could play out. And I think there are some serious consequences to that. It will show the American people that the House is completely unprepared to lead. As I said in the piece, 218 votes runs everything. If you have 218 votes, you can do just about anything in the House. But if you don't have 218 votes, you can't do much of anything. And if Kevin McCarthy or whoever it may be starts off showing that they don't have 218 votes, they don't have 218 people behind them, he goes into a negotiation with Democrats, he's dead from the beginning. So his ability to get things done, I think, will be limited. The House will, again, be a laughingstock, and it just does not set up Republicans very well for long-term success. And I think it says a lot about how broken our politics are.
It's an interesting point that you raise about vetting. I've been hearing a lot of interesting discussion, kind of discussed almost in sports terms, about how the people who are against McCarthy, or even if they're not against him, they're kind of betting that he might not survive this. They're keeping names out of the hat, effectively. They're not talking about who might be viable contenders. There's nobody who's really standing up to run. You yourself said in your piece today that you think Representative Andy Biggs has put his name forward essentially as a placeholder, knowing that he'll never be Speaker, but he's willing to put his name out there simply to be the person who represents the challenge. But this is a further interesting point. By nobody effectively running for it who has a real shot at it, and this process starting anyway because of the constitutional imperative of the last Congress ending and us needing to start this thing, we could end up with somebody being thrust into the very top levels of leadership around whom there hasn't been any more of debate outside their congressional district as to whether or not they're a member of Congress. It might be somebody who's basically totally unknown and therefore totally unvetted at a national level.
Yeah, I don't think George Santos is going to be the next speaker. But you're right. It could be someone that is not at all on the radar and nobody that has had the vetting. I think there are some really interesting strategic decisions going on right now. And I have to give some credit to the Freedom Caucus members who are plotting here. I think it's actually a good strategy for them to not put somebody out there. It will be really hard for anybody to emerge, particularly early on in this process, and openly say they are challenging Kevin McCarthy and actually beat him. The reason for that is, if Kevin McCarthy doesn't get it, and I'm not saying that he won't, he still has a very good chance of becoming Speaker, but if he doesn't, they still have to turn around and get 218 votes for somebody else. Only 4 people can lose on that vote as well. So if somebody comes, maybe a Steve Scalise, who's the number 2 right now, says he's going to challenge Kevin McCarthy, that's going to upset a lot of people, a lot of McCarthy backers. Whoever is the next speaker is probably going to need Kevin McCarthy to vote for them if it's not Kevin McCarthy. So I think it's actually good politics for them to hold back, not put anybody up. If Kevin McCarthy is not ultimately the speaker, it's probably going to have to come down to him at some point throwing in the towel, having enough votes and having enough embarrassment and saying, I just can't get there, I give up. Because I don't think that anybody can outwardly challenge him, or else they're going to find the same trouble that they're in too, and that person may lose as well.
And the process, as you point out today, whoever emerges, whether it's Mr. McCarthy or somebody else, this process will inherently weaken them to the point where the ongoing control of the Congress, the ongoing control of the House in terms of what it's able to do, will be in question from the very beginning. As you said today, the embarrassment may be the point. Brendan Buck, you have an invaluable perspective on this, thanks to your experience working as a senior advisor to 2 previous Republican speakers of the House. Thanks for joining us tonight. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.